Hey everybody, it is Kimmy Coco, your host of Innovative Black Station's Connecting the Dots podcast. How are you? We have a lot to discuss, but today we have a special guest, and I want to introduce her. She is running for District 4 School Board in Fulton County. Her name is Francesca Warren. Welcome, Francesca Warren.
Hello, thanks for having me.
You're welcome. I'm so glad that you're here because education is in the forefront of the news lately.
Absolutely.
Atlanta is in the forefront of the news lately. Black women are in the forefront of the news lately, and you know we can do everything and anything. One of the things I admired about when I was reading about you is that your passion for education shows in the extra work that you do. As well as being in education, you're also an author.
Absolutely.
And the books that you have written are about education.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, it's just in your blood, obviously.
It is.
And that comes from, I think, you know, because my family, not my mom, but my aunt, my grandma, and like generations of my family to my great grandmother have all been in education. And I think that comes from a person that has the ability to deeply love someone and want them to go further in life. So I applaud you for that.
Thank you.
So let's just get down to it.
Okay, let's go.
How is it going with your campaign?
It's going well. You know, when I decided to run 6-7 months ago, I'm not a career politician. So I'm an educator who wants to make a difference, and I've done so much work in South Fulton around education. I had people coming to me every day, are you gonna run for school board? Are you gonna run for school board? And I was like, I don't know. And the hesitation was, I wanna get things done. And sometimes in politics, you wanting to get things done, it's not enough.
Yeah.
And so for me, these last 7 months have been transformative because it's allowed me to not only expand my network, but to say that some of the things that are standing in our way are imaginary. And so sometimes you have to be a part of the structure to bring about change. And that is what I want to do with this campaign.
So let everyone know, I mean, we've had people that have run for positions in Fulton County.
Absolutely.
And Fulton County is, it's pretty big.
Humongous.
So specifically District 4, and we discussed this, and you were saying that the districts aren't broken down for education or for the boards and stuff like that, as they are for government office. So tell everyone what District 4 is made of.
So District 4 encompasses 3 clusters. So it's the Langston Hughes cluster, so all of the middle and elementary schools in that cluster, the Creekside cluster, all of the elementary schools and the middle schools, and also Westlake cluster, all the elementary schools and middle schools. So it is different than your regular city. So it's it encompasses City of South Fulton, Union City, Palmetto, Chattahoochee Hills, Fairburn, and so if you live in those areas, you will be voting for District 4 School Board.
So everyone, pay attention. Tell them again, kind of like slow, because you know people need to understand
Absolutely.
what this is. Also understand that this is, you know, a lot of the decisions that are being made now because of the structure and because of the, I don't want to say incompetency of the higher ups in federal government, but you know what's going on. So, I mean, the local elections are very important. So just tell people where that is, and again, so that they kind of understand.
Absolutely. If you live in Fairburn, if you live in City of South Fulton, if you live in Palmetto, if you live in Chattahoochee Hills, if you live in Union City, you are going to vote for District 4, Fulton County District 4 School Board. So that's important for people to know, because people will say, oh, I didn't know that. First off, they'll say, who is your school board member? Then they'll say, oh, well, where do I live? How do I find out? Just like you go to find out who represents you in your city or your state or your government, federal levels, you go to the SOS website and it'll tell you what district you're in. So this is Fulton County District 4.
So SOS.gov, it tells you a lot of things. It
Yes.
tells you where you vote. It tells you who you're voting for. You want to find out more about your election and your stance on certain issues, specifically electfrancesca.com.
Yes, absolutely.
Is where you can go. And you can go there right now while we're talking.
Go on
and
there.
we're on live on CTD_ATL on Instagram. So if you have any questions, go to her website, read really quickly, hurry up, and then come back and if you have any questions. I'm going to be honest, I can't see it because the phone's pretty far away, but I'll we'll address them later, and you'll know how to get in touch with you because on your website.
Absolutely.
Okay. So I was watching the news on Thursday because I have to keep up with what's going on, and as you can tell, I haven't done much outside of home still. I'm still afraid. And I'm still
Absolutely.
very cautious and leery, as we should be, because the coronavirus is running rampant through Georgia.
Yes.
We still don't have a mask mandate, but I encourage everybody to wear their mask.
Yes,
I was
I have
reluctant to even take my mask off for this interview, y'all.
Yeah.
I'm telling you.
Yes.
Put your mask on. The CDC and a lot of health officials have said wearing a mask could get this under control in 4 to 8 weeks.
Absolutely.
So anyway, I was watching the news on Thursday, and lo and behold, who pops up on the screen? Miss Francesca, and they were asking her, where she stood in regard to having the kids come back to school. And so I'm going to ask you now, what do you think about the kids returning to school? Because here we are in mid-July.
Yes.
So we're less than a month away from school starting, and we're worse off now than we were at the beginning of this. So what do
Yes.
you think the kids should do?
So absolutely, the kids should not be going back to school. And we found out this past Monday, that Fulton County is actually going to an all remote. So kids will be at home and they will be learning. And here's the thing, with schools, we have to understand that it's really not schools' responsibility to get COVID under control. But because of the lack of leadership at the state level and at the federal level, schools are having to they want schools to jumpstart the economy. And so it's just not safe. It's not safe for our teachers, our principals, our kids, and remote is the only way. And again, if people would wear their mask, I have mine in my purse, we could have this under control and we could start school in October. But as I've gone out and I've seen people are not wearing masks. People are just, I think they believe that it won't happen to them. Or even if they think that it will happen to them, there's a lot of misinformation on the news, not the news, but just over social
on the
media.
internet.
Yeah.
Period. I've
Yeah.
seen okay, so you guys know I've been pro mask, pro sanitize, pro wipe things down.
Absolutely.
For this whole time. But it's taken a while before the right information has gotten to the right people. For example, in the beginning of this, way back like January, February, people were saying, oh, black people can't get it.
Yeah.
Then it went from, oh, black people can't get it, and that took a while. So imagine all the black people that got it that could have prevented getting it from
Yes.
that misinformation.
Yes.
Then it went from that to, oh, it's 5G technology. Then it went from that to, oh, well, it's bad, but it's not that bad. And having the officials in Washington, D.C. co-sign those thoughts is not helping. It's not helping. So their main concern is to get the economy jump started. So
Yeah.
I think that what they're saying is, hey, if the kids go back to school, the parents can go back to work.
Absolutely.
And then we can't, be paying for everybody. But I think there's a better way. I mean, so when you see on the news that the Fulton County School District, does that encompass South Fulton as well?
That does, yes. It comes in South Fulton, North Fulton, yes.
So Fulton County School District it includes South Fulton. So
Yes.
you guys are doing all remote learning.
All remote learning for as the time is being, yes.
So some of the challenges that you can face from remote learning, do you think all the kids might not be able to afford to have laptops or maybe their parents
Absolutely.
don't have Wi-Fi? What is the school district going to do about stuff like that?
So right now, the school district for grades 3 through 12, everybody can get a laptop. So the parents,
Oh, really?
yes, everybody can get a laptop. And what they did in March is that the kids kept their laptops from last year. So the only way that you had to give it back is if you were a student who was leaving the school district and or graduating. So all the kids have them. And there was a process that if you have an issue with it, getting it fixed. And now the school district is also saying they're refreshing those, but they're also saying that we have hotspots. And so if you need a hotspot, go from there. Because the reality is that there are some parents who can help their kids and they will be there every day. They will be making sure the kids do the work. But we also have parents who don't have that resource. It may be that you're an essential worker, you're a nurse, you're a
Right.
CNA,
Yeah.
you don't have the time. Or you might be somebody who's just said, I just can't do it. I don't have the mental space. And that's okay also. And so we as a community really have to tune into one another and to help. So I founded a group called South Fulton Parents for Education. And one of the things that I did early on, this was probably May, June, is that we decided to do pods. So these pods are parent directed, and a parent would say, I have a 10, 8, and 7-year-old, and I need help and they would combine with other families. The families would figure out their rules. They would, do the CDC recommended guidelines, but those families would lean upon one another to help them. And it may be a space where you may be able to afford through that pod for you to actually get a teacher to come in and help. Or you might say, you know what, between our two families, we can do this. But we really are going to have to, as a community, wrap our arms around one another and help. Because there are some people who have the money, but the mental space, they're struggling through this. And so it's upon us as a community for us to say, what do you need and how do we go about getting you that?
So how does somebody get involved in that?
It's on Facebook. So it's a Facebook group. So South Fulton COVID Pods. And it's an onset group of South Fulton Parents for Education. So we have about 3,000 parents, and the pod group is coming up on 1,000. And so all day parents are willing and dealing and figuring out who has room for me, or I can take this many kids, and trying to figure out the particulars of it and feeling comfortable, right? Because I'm in a pod, and so we've all agreed that, we won't associate with anybody outside the pod. We'll get COVID tested. And so it's all these things. We decided that, and we come to an agreement, and we'll say, okay, we're gonna have 2 teachers to come in, 90 minutes, 3 times a week. We're gonna have 2 of them, figuring out the price, how will we split it, who'll do lunch. Those are things that we're having to figure out, but that's what the community needs, because we're going to remote learning. And so your neighbor down the street who works nights or who works during the day from 7 to 7, what resources do they need, and how can we combine what we have?
A lot has been said about how remote learning is affecting the mental health of the children.
Absolutely.
So we've been, it kind of happened late in the school year last year, remote learning. So I guess maybe it might still be too early to find out how it's affecting them. But have you seen any negative effects of remote learning on the children?
Yeah, my kids are done with the computer unless it's YouTube. So they don't want to learn on the computer anymore. And what I've had to do as a parent is say, okay, we've got mandatory outside time. We're not going into the city and doing things like we usually would do, but y'all got to get out and ride your bike. You have to get away from it, turning the Wi-Fi off, because it just becomes so overwhelming. And so last year with remote learning, I just found that my kids would check out after a certain time. So I would give them breaks, and I would say, hey, come off the computer for an hour. You'll get it when you come back. And so just giving them the things as adults that we know. We know when we get stressed out as adults, we walk away from the computer or we come back to it. So giving them those mechanisms early and letting them kind of know, this is what you do when you get to that point.
When the school let out, or when it went to remote learning at the end of last year, another issue came up that, I was kind of unfamiliar with myself. So I'm sure that a lot of people weren't aware about the food issue that children have, and that a lot of kids, the only place they eat at is at school.
Absolutely.
So I see a lot of the schools came together, and they had a place where you can come to the school,
yes,
pick up lunch, stuff like that. Do you think that they will incorporate that into now, because we've been preparing, we have more time now for the summer. Do you think you'll see more of that next year?
Yes. So Fulton County has already said that they're going to offer, parents can pre-order meals if they get free and reduced lunch. And so they will have that. And so right now in the summer, you go on Wednesdays and you get enough lunches for 5 days. So you have lunch and breakfast for 5 days.
And you bring it home.
You bring it home and go from there. And the reality is that a lot of kids, the only nutritious meal they get is at school. That's why you have a lot of kids who stay in after school, because after school serves dinner. So some kids are getting 3 meals a day in schools. And so that's something that we as a community have to understand, and we have to figure out, especially for those families who don't drive or who depend on MARTA and they don't have MARTA cards. So we have to make sure that, we're reaching back out to them. It's even though I'm good, that doesn't mean everybody else is good. And so as a community, we have to figure out where are the food deserts, and then how can we push in, what resources do we have, because that's so critical. Kids can't learn if they're hungry.
I think, we always promote on this show, pay attention to your community leaders, because, with the thing I've gotten from this recent events, not only with COVID, just, politically, socially, we really need each other.
Absolutely.
And there's going to be a lot of kids that are going to have to be home alone. Mm-hmm. A lot of people have gone back to work. They're cutting off the unemployment extra $600.
Yes.
some people had the after school program that, probably isn't going to be around right now.
Right.
So as a community, we just really have to look out for each other. Man. So what are you seeing as a trend as far as people getting ready for remote learning? Like mentally as a parent, you're used to your routine.
Absolutely.
So when people, what challenges do you see that the parents are facing?
Yeah.
Having to, I mean, I don't even know, because I don't have school age children, but I don't know what I would have done. Like, you literally have to make sure the kid is completing their work. I mean,
Yeah.
the kids talk remotely to their teacher once in a while, but it's not the same. You literally have to switch into this role. So what are you hearing? What are you as a parent going through, and what are you
Yeah.
hearing the parents go through?
I think it's a lot about schedules, right? Because kids are creatures of habit. So my kids right now in summer, they're like at home, chilling, watching TV, getting them back on a schedule to say, here's when you're going to do your work, and then here's when I can monitor it. And I have a 5-year-old, I have a 10-year-old, I have a 12-year-old, and I have a 20-year-old.
Oh, my God.
So my son is going to college. He's going back to college in August. So my 5-year-old, I've already decided her school starts after I finish work. Because I have to be hands-on with her. I can't leave her to the devices of her own, because she'll be all over the place. So parents are having to figure that out. And that's why it's important for parents to understand who their board members are, because these are people that make those decisions. So when everybody was upset that kids were going to go back to school, or they may not go back to school, and it was split and people were arguing, those are decisions that your board members have input on. These are the people who are going to say, because they're getting feedback from their community. So it's really important. So I've tried to educate parents and saying, here's your board member. If you have a concern, reach out. And even if you don't have a concern, if you want to say kudos, I really appreciate what you're doing, reach out. But just being engaged and understanding that, because a lot of parents have reached out and said, I didn't hear about the decision, what's going on? And so, they may not be on social media, they may not do email, and they just don't know. Yeah. So doing that has really, I've had to say, okay, no, this is the plan, and try to help them get resources so that they can do it effectively in the fall, or at least connect them with somebody who can.
So a lot of schools, I've heard my friends mention, they've gotten surveys.
Yes.
And the surveys were saying, would you want your kids to go back to school? And if not, would you be like open to maybe half days or whatever? Mm-hmm. So as a majority, what did you find that people were saying?
It was split. It was split. There were parents, and rightfully so, who said, I work a full-time job. Me and my husband do. I have to be at work from 7 to 7. I can't do this. And there are other parents who say, absolutely not. My children are not going back into a school building. There were some people who say, can we do both? Can we have some in school and some out? So it was split. And I found that it was split because a lot of us, we understand the dangers of coronavirus. However, it's not until we actually know somebody with it, right? I had a parent one time tell me, it's just like the flu. The kids it'll be just like the flu. And then a mutual friend got corona. And so listening to their perspective, they were like, oh no. So it just really depended. But we had both sides and a third side for blended.
So we were kind of talking before, and you had mentioned that they may open the schools back up in October.
Yes.
So what do you guys have in place? Do you have a plan in place, or what does, school opening up look like now with all this going on?
It depends on how this disease goes. If it's still how it is right now, and cases are doubling each day, I don't believe we'll be back in a building. But that ultimately is what the school board and the superintendent, which is one of the reasons that I was so adamant that once I finally decided that I was going to run, it was important for me. Because these are local politics matter because it affects your daily life. You being able to go to work, your kids being able to go to school, that affects you. Yes, Donald Trump affects you, but day-to-day politics, those local elections. So we don't know what school is going to look like, and I think all school districts across the metro area, across the country, are trying to figure this out because, I was just telling my son, because he was like, why don't people just wear a mask? I said, we're in a pandemic. I said, and most people our age and our generation, they've never been through it. If you look at the Spanish flu of 1918, there were the debates, people didn't want to wear masks then. And so history is repeating itself, and unfortunately, we're not learning lessons because in America, and rightfully so, we have lots of rights. but people are not understanding the greater good for the community. So you have people out without masks. You have people who are sick who are still going in groups of people. You know, it's just unfortunate.
If you look at the other countries that have gotten a hold of this, the countries that have gotten a hold of it the fastest and the most effectively
Germany
are the ones that were like, they stopped everything for a certain amount of time, or they had an effective contact tracing,
Yes.
effective testing, and you know, I don't know, this just general, you know, feeling that they wanted to get a hold of it. And what I'm starting to see from Americans is that it's like, you want it to stop, but you don't want to do anything to stop it. Like,
Yeah.
you don't want to, everyone doesn't want to wear a mask. Everyone doesn't want to social distance. Everyone still wants to go to the bar, the club, the restaurant, the pool, the beach, and just have it go away. And I think because we allowed that to kind of go on for so long, it's going to take a minute before other people realize, like you said, hopefully it doesn't take for someone that they know to get it, but I'm starting to, I think that's what it takes, like for
Yeah.
someone that you know to get it and to see how it affects you. Some of the medical experts are saying, you know, well, the government, which they're not medical experts, but they weigh in on the subject a lot without any medical research behind what they're
Absolutely.
saying, that the children are not dying from it as much as the older people are, so they are willing to put your kids back in school, kind of like an experiment almost. Like, okay, well,
Absolutely.
we'll try it out. We've seen that, you know, the kids that are getting it aren't getting it as bad, but if you think about it, because school wasn't in, the most children are getting it from someone else, so it's like that second.
Absolutely.
So we really don't know
Yeah.
what's going to happen to the kids and or to the students' parents when they get home and give it to them, or what about the students that are living with their grandparents?
Yeah, or the teachers,
Or the teachers.
Yeah. We don't know, and I just read I read an article about an 8-year-old boy who's had a fever for like 90 days.
Yeah.
He tested positive for coronavirus. He's negative now, but he still has this fever that won't go away. I think all in all, like what you said, we want it to go away, but we don't necessarily want to do our part, and that's why it's important for our kids to stay home right now, because we have to get this. And what I personally think is that we probably need to shut down from a state level. It's probably not going to happen, but we need something where people cannot go because
People are going to go.
because then when it's
Because
open,
they
it's
can.
open. Yeah, and it's unfortunate.
It's sad because what I'm seeing now is the private sector taking the lead on this and saying, you can't come into our store without
Yeah.
a mask.
Yeah.
And it shouldn't be like that. Thank God that the leaders and the CEOs of these corporations found it within their heart to say,
Yeah.
you know, we're going to mandate masks because the government is not doing it. And for the life of me, I don't understand why. So we've seen the state level government get into the city's business. And I think the
Yeah.
city, I don't know. I mean, from a state level, you can't, and I heard Brian Kemp, who's the governor of Georgia, had a press conference the other day, and he was saying, you know, I'm the head of this state, and you know, people in Albany, Georgia, they got it under control just fine. But in my mind, I'm like, you can't compare Albany to Atlanta,
Absolutely.
because there's way more things to do. There's way more places to gather, and way more groups of people in the street in Atlanta than in Albany. So you can't make that blanket statement. So
Absolutely.
whatever happens in Atlanta surely will affect South Fulton, even though they're not necessarily in your voting district, right?
Absolutely.
So do you think that the governor's decisions are gonna negatively affect the daily lives of the students of the school? Because the parents, some of them follow him, and
Absolutely.
they voted for him, obviously.
I think that in this situation, it's not because Fulton County has made the decision to go remote, right? If I'm up in Gwinnett, where they plan to open in person August 5th, which is less than 2 weeks away, yes, it's going to greatly affect them. Thank God that our leadership in Fulton County, our superintendent, Dr. Looney, had the foresight to say kids are going to stay remotely. And he made that decision after parents and community members and people weighed in heavily. So thank God for that. I think right now that we should be focused on how do we make sure that when kids are in remote learning, how do we make sure they're learning? How do we make sure parents have the support? How do we make sure that we bring in community partners to help with the slide that we know is going to happen? Because people who have ulterior motives, who want kids in schools for whatever reason, they're going to have to figure that out when kids get sick, because they inevitably will. They will get sick, And I hope kids don't get really sick, but we've seen cases where they have passed away. And so we have to focus on our locus of control, I can't talk. And part of that is our kids are going remotely. What can we do to make sure that families and students and teachers feel supported?
I hope that everything works out for the better. I'm really hoping that some of these people's hearts turn around and some of their minds changed and some of them scale back, because, I mean, I don't understand how we saw fit, and by we, I say I'm thinking of the state government in Kemp's office, to send in the National Guard to protect these buildings and these monuments and these places, but no one is protecting
Teachers,
students, children. Even with, I've seen the stats say that the crime has even gone up in Fulton County, but I don't see the National Guard neighborhood watching or something like that. They're just protecting these buildings. So
Right.
I just hope, like you said, the local government is making better decisions, parents make better decisions, and maybe from the grassroots level, from our level, from these homes, we send a message up the ladder that says we want to protect our kids, we want our kids to be safe, and hopefully that'll help them make better decisions. So how is campaigning going with not being able to kind of do community things?
Absolutely. So we've been really innovative. So from social media, we have people that actually knock on doors, but not knock on doors to talk to people, but just to give them our literature. And so we've really had to be innovative and really reach parents on the other side. So one of the things you talked about was crime. One of the things that parents are seeing now is that their kids are home and they're noticing behaviors that they did not realize when kids were at school, and they're saying, how do I control this? What do I do?
In their own children?
In their own children,
Oh.
right? And in neighborhood children. And so one of the things that my campaign has been really heavy on is in South Fulton, we have a lot of, people always talk about the crime, but we don't talk about what to do to stop the crime. And I'm not talking stop from they've done it and parole. I'm talking grassroots.
Yeah, when
And
you start noticing that
yeah.
right away.
Right away.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that I want to do is to form a mentoring collaborative, meaning that in South Fulton we have really great mentoring programs. So whether it's Zena's House, shout out to my soror Bernice, whether it's Gary Davis's Next Level Boys Academy, putting those people into getting everybody together at the table, figuring out what schools need, because schools know the kids who are on the path that they are not going to be productive, and getting those mentorship programs into elementary schools and middle schools so that kids don't get to high school and they're out of control and parents are like, whoa, what happened? And they get enthralled into the criminal life. And that's what happens. I was a teacher I was in education for 18 plus years. I taught school for 12 years. I was a high school English teacher. I taught around the corner at South Atlanta High School. I was at Therrell High School. I worked in district level. And what I tell parents and what I tell community members is that most kids don't want to do criminal things, right? But they're pushed into it by a lure of money, of fame, whatever it is. And so you have to get them young. You have to make sure, just like gangs recruit them when they're in third grade, you have to recruit them for good things.
Yeah.
And so, you need your elected officials. What better position than on the school board to say, how can we open up these opportunities and really push into our children so that we can help change lives of kids?
So what is some of the issues that your school district is facing specifically?
So specifically, and this is around my campaign, is pre-COVID, there was a lot of teaching to the test. So the end of the state milestones assessment, and one of the things that I've been very vocal about is that we have to give kids a rich academic experience, and that means that not teaching to the test, but making sure that we're doing things smart and we're very streamlined on how we do things, right? It's not effective for you to go to the doctor and say, I don't feel good, and they test you for everything from A to Z, right? Mm-hmm. You don't really do that because you're gonna end up paying for things that you don't need.
Yes.
It's gonna take extra time, and you're gonna get all this data that is not pertinent to how you feel. Mm-hmm. So the same applies to in education. What testing do our kids need, and then how can we help teachers have the most rigorous learning experiences for all kids. I have 4 children, and 2 of my children are gifted, and then I have a daughter with a learning disability, and I have a 5-year-old. So she's out of lots of energy. But my daughter, who has a learning disability, it's very important for her to have hands-on stuff. It's very important for her not to sit and get. If she's going to be just talking about a test, she checks out. She's done. She doesn't care. She'll put anything down. And so making sure that we're bringing in common sense things so that, yes, kids have to take our milestones at the end of the year, but what leads up to that looks very different, and that we're really making sure every day, 180 days of a school year, kids are getting rigorous instruction. And that's a change of conversation, right? Because there's lots of debates on what schools are better, but I always contend, what are the programs of study? What are we actually asking kids to do? Because what I found when I was a teacher is that we can mask things up and make things look pretty, but in day-to-day, what are you asking children to do? What are you asking families to do? That's where you get the bang for your buck.
Yeah, so earlier, before COVID actually, another thing that happened from the state level is that they were getting rid of the standardized tests. So you think that that's a good idea, or do you think that that was a bad idea?
So they were looking to streamline it, and I think it definitely has to be looked at, because you have children. I think testing is important. You need to know what kids know and what they don't know, so you can help them. But we have to move away from this, especially for brown and black children and poor children, right? That everything is focused on one test. Because what it does is it marginalizes children, and children are now, you're a level 1 learner, you're a level 2 learner. That's not true. And so I think for pre-COVID, I think we need to examine those things. But also now during this pandemic, it's been a blessing and a curse, and that state testing was canceled this past year. And we have, Fulton County did a waiver, the state of Georgia did a waiver for testing for this upcoming year. And we need to do that, because the most important thing throughout this whole pandemic is not only us staying healthy, but also making sure that kids are learning.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think this is a good opportunity, too, for people to pitch, like, science and health and, just to get the kids to learn more about viruses and diseases,
So I made my kids watch Pandemic on Netflix. Because they're 10 and 12 and 5 and 20, and my 20-year-old has heard it, but even then he was like, he didn't really understand it. So I made them watch Pandemic, and everybody's like, oh, they're going to get scared. I was like, no, they have to learn about that, and that's science, and, it's all these different content areas that we can mix in. So it's just really important that, and I tell parents that you can't go wrong making sure your children are learning real things, because you want them to leave this pandemic smarter. You want them to leave and say, wow, why did we do this? Or why did we do it this way? Wouldn't it have been better?
Right.
Because you're trying to raise children to be able to voice what they need. Because as adults, as an adult, I don't take a test and bubble it down and that determines what I do.
You never do that.
You never do that. You have to be able
never
to
do that.
effectively speak and advocate, and that's what we should be teaching children.
Yes, definitely. So I was just looking up some stats about kids with coronavirus stats, just from the CDC. And so if you really want to learn about some of the stuff and how it's affected children and some of the ins and outs, there's a whole page on cdc.gov about children, specifically children. Children under the age of 18, the number of cases is kind of going up. So the school hasn't started yet. I'm just looking at the CDC website to get a overview. And also the symptoms for children are different.
Absolutely.
So, you need to look that up, kind of research it, find out. The hospitalizations are going up too for younger kids. The numbers and the stats that we're sliding toward senior citizens in the beginning of this is the age is just like gradually going down. And I'm going to assume that when school starts, that's going to, change. But
Absolutely.
Find out. And the thing too is because it's a novel, a new virus, there's still a lot to learn about it. So, I'm staying home and I'm not really interacting with people and obviously not getting my hair done because they don't know enough about it for me. You know what I mean? And right now, it's kind of like people are guinea pigs. They're testing medicine. They're testing vaccines. They're testing. So until they and even from March till July, there's a lot that we know. I'm going to agree with the governor. He said this at his press conference. Like, we know different. We know more now than we did before. So we're moving different.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say that I would not mandate masks because of that, because I definitely would have still said mandate masks, because the states that did mandate masks
Absolutely.
got a hold of it. So before we wrap it up, what do you think the most important thing you want to do when you become a part of the school board is? What effective change are you going to make?
I think first is making sure that parents feel comfortable in knowing, not only knowing who their board member is, but connecting with me. One of the things that I want to do once I'm elected, because we're claiming it, is that in South Fulton, there's this perception that our kids can't learn. There's this perception that education is not good. So it's important for me in those first 90 days is to do a survey for the parents. And how do you feel about your school? What do you wish would change? And meeting with the schools also to feel what would they like to change and what is their perception. And then working to mirror the visions and working to make sure that we're doing relevant things in 2020. A lot of parents come to me and say, you know what, I didn't like this school didn't work for our family, what are you gonna do differently? I say, well, first we gotta figure out what resources do we have and what can we do to push those resources into our schools. It's 2020 and we talked about this earlier. You know, when we're talking about kids getting bored at school, we should have some type of videography class or like things that are out of the way. A lot of our kids are not static learners. And so for me as a board member, it's bringing resources to the schools and bringing schools to the communities so that we can meet the vision and we can work together. I always say this, but the schools belong to the community and the community belongs to the schools. And if you want award-winning schools, you have to get somebody who can speak the language of education, but can also speak to the parents and speak to the corporations that you're going to work with, and that's me. I spent a long time in education, and throughout my career, I worked with principals, administrators, superintendents, all these type of people because, you know, I've written books, I've spoken at conferences, and you have to be able to do that side, but you also have to know policy. And a lot of people don't understand that school boards set policies, right? Right now in Fulton County, we're fighting for an equity policy because policy stay on books. You don't get rid of policies when someone changes jobs. And so you have to understand also how important policy is and getting policy across. And then also, how do you interact with your parents? I've been doing this work, I've been in education for 18 plus years, but I've been doing this work with parents in South Fulton since my son was in school, who's 20. But for the last 4 years with the nonprofit South Fulton Parents for Education, I have been able to build relationships with parents, and those are the relationships that you can leverage so that when you need to bring in businesses, when you need to have events, when you need to do things, you can bring that. And it's a complex job. You don't get on school board to perch and to say, I'm a school board member. You get on school board to exact change. And for me, I have a 5-year-old. I have at least 12 more years in the system with her. I have a 7th grader and a 5th grader. So setting policy affects students, it affects teachers, it affects kids. And so for me, it's very important that there's an educator on that board, and it's very important that I work for District 4 to make sure that the schools are what the parents want, what the schools want, and what the community wants.
That sounds good to me. One last question. What do you think about incorporating, like, you know, when I was in high school, they had, well, I was, you know, the college prep curriculum or whatever, but what do you think about, like, a vocational program in high schools or even in middle schools so that, you know, you talked about, like, bringing in, like, videographers and stuff like that, but what do you think about, like, maybe, I don't know, some apprentice kind of, like, programs from the corporations in South Fulton and bridging that gap?
Absolutely. On the South Side, we have a South Learning Center that does a lot of the vocational things, but I'm thinking even in middle school, apprenticeships would help so very much, because in middle schools where kids start to feel antsy, they're not really excited about learning, figuring out what kids are interested in and having people come into the schools, doing workshops, letting that apprenticeship, let them learn what they want to do. So by the time they get to high school, they have an idea and they're excited about school still.
Yeah.
But that's where it takes somebody who can go and speak to organizations and can go and speak to companies and say, hey, we have kids who want to be coders. Can you give us this many coders during this time of the day at this school? That's what it takes. And you can't wait for people to come to you. You have to go out and get it. And that's just 2020. That's just how it is. So for me, it's going to be important for me to go to those businesses and say, at this school, parents in the school want this. How can we make it mesh? And it's hard, but you have to understand the education side, the policy side, and then that relationships. Because ultimately, a company will say, oh, we'll work with you because I like you.
Right.
Right? I
Yeah.
like you.
Yeah.
And if I don't think you can do the job, they won't do it. So for me, when parents are going, starting tomorrow during early voting and on August 11th, they can know that I'm like this. I'm able to speak. I'm able to talk. I'm able to build relationships. But more importantly, I am a parent like you. That's why we said the parent's choice, right? Because parents, community members, we all have a voice and we all have to be comfortable saying things. We don't always have to agree. But as long as we're talking about our schools and we're supporting our schools, that's how you get to the next step.
So they're gonna have people that are able to vote here at State Farm Arena.
Yes.
Is that
Yes.
oh.
People can go to State Farm Arena.
Nice.
I think there are at least 20 spots all over Fulton County. I was trying to think South Fulton, how many spots there are. There's at least 10 in South Fulton. Early vote. You saw the debacle that was last voting day where people were outside for hours, and vote early. School board elections are important, and I want people to understand that because at the last election on June 9th, we were the very last office on the ticket.
Ballot.
Now we're going to be of 3 offices. Vote, vote, vote. You have to vote because if you don't vote, then you really can't complain.
So what is it going to say on the ballot? Like, what do they need to check? It's going to say, because if you're in school district 4, it's
Yes.
going to say,
School board member Francesca Warren, I will be the first person on the ballot. Hit that, and then you can submit.
so you're the first one on the ballot?
Because you can see when you go to the sos.gov,
You'll see the actual sample
ballot.
ballot. Okay.
Yes. And if you're doing absentee voting, there's different drop-off locations. They're usually at the early voting places, and they have cameras on them 24 hours. Drop your ticket. But I found that on June 9th voting, it was very clean. They were wiping down everything. You are socially distancing, and it's quick. So early vote if you can.
And if you live or if you work downtown, check out the State Farm Arena.
Yeah.
I think that's a wonderful thing. And I've
Absolutely.
seen on the news the actual voting booths, and they're way far away from each other. There's a
Yeah.
whole bunch of them.
Yeah.
And be a part of history. That'll be the first
Absolutely.
time that's happening. And I heard that some Atlanta Hawks people were going to be around, kind
Oh.
of like, I don't know, don't quote me, because allegedly, they're somewhere in a bubble in Disney trying to get the NBA season. Oh, they're not? Oh, okay. Well, maybe it was true then. So you might run into an Atlanta Hawk. I'm just saying,
Absolutely.
ladies, go down there to vote. So make sure you guys check out your website. What was it again? I saw it and I told
It's
them.
www.electfrancesca.com. You can type in Francesca Warren on all platforms: Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. You can go there if you need.
And
if you
people answer back.
Yeah, absolutely. Answer back questions. People have called me. I have a question. What are you going to do? So, yes.
That's
please do.
good. That's good. That's good. And all I'm saying is the last person that was on here, she got elected. So I'm just saying you might want to come see us, people. Thank you guys for watching. Check us out on Instagram at CTD_ATL and follow Innovative Black Station. I never say that. I'm sorry. Make sure you follow that and listen to this podcast wherever you listen to your favorite podcast, and also subscribe to our YouTube channel, Connecting the Dots Podcast. And I'm out. Peace.